19, all clients like it because you have everything now in this vintage. 18 was more a little acid, and now after one year in bottle, it's a little closed, but I think with the 19 it will be more easy to drink in the young moment. And we had a very good maturity, not so high because we decided to start the harvest the 12th of September, and alcoholic maximum is 13.3, like an 18 vintage, but you have a lot of 14, 14.5, 15 degrees in Côte de Nuits, because a lot of people started, so for me, so late. No, but we are very lucky since a few years, because we have a good sun, good maturity, phenolic maturity, not botrytis, and it's not possible to have bad wines with all very good conditions.
How did you, in 2018, how did you come to 13.3, 13.5, while others are 1 degree or more over you? It was did you farm it differently so you could pick it differently, or did you just pick it earlier?
Earlier, because 2 weeks before the harvest, usually we did picking some berries, 100 berries per parcels, the same parcels every year, to have a good reference with the old vintages. 2 pickings per week, in total 4 pickings, and we analyzed the alcoholic and sugar, and we decided to start with the same parcels, because we know all parcels and the maturity of each parcels, and and we started with 12.8, and the last harvest was 13.34 maximum. I think it's very important because I think at 13, for the moment, I think about the future, because I think it's possible to have the same problem than the other hot countries, for example, California or Chile or Australia. You can analyze just the sugar and not the phenolic maturity. Yes, when you test the berries before the harvest, you look at the pepin, the seed, and you can see it's green. It's not good. It's brown. You have a good maturity. And when you do the picking before the harvest, we look at the seed and we decide the good date. But I don't know for the future climate if the same continue more and more hot. Maybe it's possible at 13 alcohol. It's not necessary to have a good. It's possible to have a bad maturity phenolic, and maybe we will wait more degrees to have a good maturity. And for the moment, with the 18 and 19 vintages, I think we have a good sensation when we test the wine, and I think it was a good date for the harvest. This is Bourgogne. 19 from Chambolle-Musigny and Morey-Saint-Denis. %60 old cluster vinification. And all aged barrels with old barrels, 2, 3, 4 years old. Not new oak. For the moment, for me, the new climate, it's good for the quality in Burgundy. I prefer the 10 last vintages if you compare with the 70s or 80s or the beginning of the 90s for the quality, because I think it's better for the tasting when the wine is young, and for to keeping it for a long time. The principle for me to keep a wine for a long time, it's necessary to have a good phenolic maturity. And for me, the acidity, it's not a problem, because 2003 vintage, we had no acidity, and the vintage is very good in bottle now. And I think you have a very good old wine if you had 25 years before a good phenolic maturity. And if you test the old best vintages, 59, 69, 71, 78, it was a good sun and a good maturity. And for me, it's the principle for the wine. This is Hautes-Côtes de Nuits, Louis Auguste. All vines is in my village, Chevannes. Exposition southwest. And for the Hautes-Côtes, it's better and better. Because here we are at 400 meters to 480 meters altitude, and now we have a very good maturity. We have every year we have a 10 days difference compared with the côte.
For the picking,
yeah.
What about the vegetative cycle? Is it also 10 days later than?
It's possible to have more if you had a bad climate in June for the flower. It's possible to have late and more 10 days before La Côte and Hautes-Côtes, but usually you have it depends with the village where you are for the Hautes-Côtes de Nuits. Here it's very high, and usually it's 10 days. When I finish the harvest in La Côte, I stop 1 day to have for the harvest to stop during 1 day, and after 8 or 9 days it's good. Yes. And a lot of winemakers from La Côte who wants to buy vineyard in the Hautes-Côtes because the price is good to buy, and the quality now it's very good. Here with this Hautes-Côtes, Cru Louis Auguste, we have a 60% wall cluster and a 25% new oak for the aged barrels. During 13 months in barrels, and we rack them to keep in tanks for 2-3 months before the bottling, and without filtration, without nothing. We did between 4 and 6 pigeage by foot, just by foot, because I think when you keep minimum 60% stems, you have to respect it, and if you cut the stem, you extract a lot of sap and the bad bitterness, and we want to do the pigeage by foot, and 4-6 pigeage and 4-6 remontage. Pumping? No.
Pump over.
Pump over. Total 14-15 days in total, and after press, keep the wine 1 month in tanks to have a good sedimentation, to have just the good lees in the barrel without reduction, and because it's more difficult to have a good sedimentation when you keep the stems for the vinification. It's a little more difficult to have a clean wine, and we have to wait more time in tanks to have a clean wine for the aged barrel. This is Côte de Nuits-Village from Brochon, 90% and 10 from Comblanchien and Corgoloin. 60% Walt Cluster. The same process for the vinification. Yes, 1 extraction per day maximum, or pigeage or remontage. If when I test at 6 o'clock all mornings, all cuvée, if I smell a small reduction, but I think it's necessary to do a pigeage, we can do both. Remontage for the reduction and pigeage for the extraction, but usually it's remontage or pigeage. Same vinification and 30% new oak maximum for all villages, Côte de Nuits and the other villages. And 13 months aged barrels, and the same before the bottling.
How does the Côte de Nuits-Village in Brochon compare to Côte de Nuits-Village in other areas?
For me, it's a little difference with the minerality. You have more minerality on Corgoloin and Comblanchien. It's a little more masculine, and Brochon, it's more elegant. Yes, it's the principal difference. Brochon, it's the end of La Combe de Lavaux valley, and half of Brochon, between Brochon and Fissin, all vineyard on Brochon, it's Côte de Nuits-Village, and the other half, between Brochon and Gevrey-Chambertin, it's Gevrey-Chambertin village. We test after. Usually when for the tasting, I start with the Chambolle-Musigny because it's more elegant and with less minerality, and I go to the minerality, and I finish usually with the Nuits-Saint-Georges village. For me, usually it's Chambolle-Musigny, Gevrey-Chambertin, Morey-Saint-Denis, Vosne-Romanée, and Nuits-Saint-Georges. But
in the parcels for the Chambolle-Musigny?
this is Herbeux and a little in Cherdan, the same area.
Lower on the slope.
Yeah, exactly. Just near the RN74 award. It's for the 19, I think it's elegant, but usually my Chambolle-Musigny from this area, it's a little masculine when it's young. After 2-3 years in bottle, it's a real Chambolle. The same with Chambolle-Musigny Premier Cru Les Sentiers. You touch Morey-Saint-Denis, just under the Bonne-Mare, you have more clay, and when it's young, Les Sentiers, in the blind testing, it's possible to say it's Morey-Saint-Denis. It's a little more masculine, but after 5 years in bottle, Les Sentiers, it's a real Chambolle-Musigny. And I decided to test Gevrey-Chambertin after Chambolle-Musigny because our Gevrey-Chambertin is between Brochon and Gevrey, and it's a very beautiful area for the village, and the soil is very perfect, and with a good balance between the clay and the limestone, and it's a very elegant Gevrey-Chambertin. Yeah. Gevrey-Village. You have more complexity in this Gevrey-Village if you compare with the Gevrey-Village under the RN74, because the appellation go down very long, and you have more clay and less complexity and less elegance, and here between Brochon and Gevrey it's very good.
Because in Brochon the roots really don't have to go far before they hit the bedrock, whereas in the south you have probably almost no contact with bedrock.
Yeah, and you have more food in the clay because it's easier for the soil to have everything in the clay, and the root of vines has to go down very long to have food, and when you touch the limestone you have more complexity. The same in the Grand Cru and Premier Cru. Morey-Saint-Denis. Different parcels. Les Pruliers, the south of Morey-Saint-Denis, touch Chambolle-Musigny. Bas de Cheneverie, the north. Cognier, Bras, Echezeaux, Orme. All on the same altitude, and just les Cogners and les Bras, it's touch the under the RN74 and touch the road.
Why do you think the Chambolle-Musigny is less mineral than the Morey or the Gevrey?
Because the limestone is so more soft, and you have more what the name in English, faille, hole in the limestone, and it's easier for the roots to go down, and it's not a big rock and a big limestone, and if you compare with Nuits-Saint-Georges, for example, and you have just a small minerality, but it's easier for the roots to go down. And I think you have less minerality.
So when you have the harder stones, you think you have more minerality?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's clear with Nuits-Saint-Georges.
Yeah, in Nuits-Saint-Georges, the south of Nuits-Saint-Georges, you have a carrier for the extraction of the rock to do the soil in the house, and the limestone is very, very hard. It depends with different parcels, because Saint-Georges it's 8 kilometers long. It's the longer village in la Côte de Nuits, and you have more difference. But usually in Saint-Georges you have more limestone. Vosne-Romanée, from Les Barreaux and Les Ormes. Les Barreaux, the top of the hill, just after Richebourg, Croparentou, and you have the Barreaux, and les Ormes is the opposite, and you touch RN74 near the village of Vosne.
When you pick the grapes, how long does it take before the fermentation begins?
Now we tested since 2 years without sulfur for the vinification, and I think it's necessary to have a pied de cuve. We pick grapes in the Hautes-Côtes de Nuits in a very young vine with a good maturity. We pick 2 barrels 5 days before the harvest. We start the fermentation, and when we start the harvest in La Côte, we can take 1 cases of grapes in fermentation, and we push it in the new tanks of Nuits-Saint-Georges or Vosne-Romanée to start the fermentation, because I don't want, since 15 years, I don't want to do the cold maceration. I don't like it, and without sulfur, it's necessary to have carbonic gas to protect the juice and the grapes. And usually after 1 day, the fermentation starts. For the moment, we tested just 5-4 cuvées without sulfur, and the process is good, and I want to continue for the next vintage, maybe everything without sulfur, because after, when you have no fermentation in your pied de cuve, because just 2 barrels, the first wines from La Côte started the fermentation, and we take in these tanks 1 cases, and we put in the new tanks to start the fermentation. And after 5 days, you have a lot of fermentation in the winery, and usually it's not necessary to take a cases to start. It's automatic, and you have a good condition for the fermentation. Sometimes we can't understand why. You have a very good fermentation in 1 tanks, and the parcels, another parcel, you have a problem. It's more long to finish the fermentation. You can't understand, and you speak about that with the enologue, and he say it's the same in all domains. We can't understand why here it's finished the sugar, and here it's more difficult. And every year it's not the same parcels. Maybe sometimes this vintage is Clos Sorbè, it's difficult to finish the sugar. Next vintage it's Nuits-Saint-Georges Les Pruliers, and it's very difficult to understand that.
So with the village wines, you vinify pretty much the same, but your Nuits-Saint-Georges is much more elegant than almost every Nuits-Saint-Georges village wine that I've ever tasted. And in fact, for me, the Nuits-Saint-Georges village wine is my favorite of the village wines.
Yes, me too. But everywhere in the world, when I go in the country, my importers say the same. And I have to speak about Nuits-Saint-Georges for the master class, for the wine dinner, for every tastings. I have to speak about Nuits-Saint-Georges, because all importers think the same like you. And Nuits-Saint-Georges, yes, it's more mineral. And if I do the same extraction with my Chambolle-Musigny cuvée and my Nuits-Saint-Georges cuvée, the same extraction, it's possible to have more extraction with the Nuits-Saint-Georges. But I test every cuvée all mornings during the vinification. And I know when I test Nuits-Saint-Georges, you have to be soft on the extraction. And maybe I didn't comment on dit compter, calcule the number of the pigeage. No, the feeling. Yes, for me it's good. Stop here. Maybe it's 4 pigeage or 6 pigeage on the Nuits-Saint-Georges. I don't know, but we have to do the difference between minerality on the tan and tannins here. But when you have more limestone on the soil, it's possible to extract more tannins. And the problem with Nuits-Saint-Georges, since a very long time, all winemakers wanted to do a big extraction because Nuits-Saint-Georges is masculine wine, and a lot of winemakers sold the wine to the negociant. And Nuits-Saint-Georges is very big, and the negociants bought a lot of Nuits-Saint-Georges. And it was good for them because the wine was very hard, masculine, and it was the doctor wines for the other cuvée of the negociant. And all negociants wanted to have these wines and asked it to the winemaker, I want a big Nuits-Saint-Georges. And I think old winemakers continue to do this wine because Nuits-Saint-Georges, it's very tannic and mineral and everything. But nobody like this wine. And I come to explain other things because all is a record, but we can speak about without the record. And the problem with Nuits-Saint-Georges, it's not the soul, it's the winemakers, the old winemakers. And it's the life. This is Chambolle premier Cru Les Gruenchers. Yeah, now it's very different with the other Chambolle premier Cru from me. Les Sentiers. Les Sentiers, it's very masculine when it's young. And Gruenchers, it's for me a real Chambolle-Musigny. It's very, very fine and elegant, and it's because it's easier to understand the different terroir in Côte d'Or. When you are on the RN74, you look at the vineyard and you can see different mountains. You have a new mountain with each village, okay? Montagne, vallée, village, Chambolle-Musigny, la combe de Chambolle, vallée Chambolle, okay? Another mountain, a new combe, vallée, with Vosne-Romanée, a new mountain, a new valley with la vallée du Meusin, Nuits-Saint-Georges, and after the same in Morey-Saint-Denis, the same in la Combe Grisard, just with Latricières-Chambertin and Mazoyères-Chambertin, the same with the big valley, la Combe de Lavaux, and it's, you can understand because you have not the same soil under the valley, under the mountain. On the mountain, just at the beginning of the mountain, you have more limestone, more clay and limestone. Here it's éboulis, the small.
It's coming, yeah, it's rolling down the hill.
Yeah. And it's here, not here. And it's different with Loire Valley or Bordeaux. It's more flat, and you had more, not more difference with the soil and millions années ago. And it's easier when you are in the vineyard to understand that. Yeah. And les feuilles just after on the mountain, Gruenchers on the flat area just in the Way Valley, and Les Pruliers it's here on the mountain. It's more mineral. If you compare with the Gruenchers, it's easier to understand. Yeah.
So Gruenchers is inside the comb.
Yes, in the same way.
Close, but
In the same way.
further up the hill.
Yeah, comme ça. Because after each comb you have
Dejection comb.
yeah, dejection, and Gruenchers is here. And after you go to Morey-Saint-Denis with Feuille, Bonne-Mare, and it's more masculine. Here it's not very. I think 70 centimeters. Yes, but with a good mixed piece of limestone and clay. It's a good soil. It's a light soil. After rain, you have no clay on your shoes. Morey-Saint-Denis, Clos, Sorbè. I have a very, very good nose on the Clos Sorbè and Morey-Saint-Denis village in 19. I would want, no? Yeah. This nose everywhere on my appellations. I like this. I want to plant trees in this parcel because we think about since 2 years to change everything for the culture, and we will start in December, and we will want to plant 100 trees per hectare with vegetable couverture in the soil. It's necessary. You don't. Yes, biodiversity. Everything. I think it's better as a biodynamic. Stop the plowing, because with the plowing you less the carbon, and the principal element in the soil is the carbon, and we have to do the modification for the soil, because our soil is dead, and we have to do a new fertilization in the soil, natural fertilization with the vegetable couverture. We have to plant in the next September Févrole, Vesse, cereal, different plant, and in March you have 1 meters of this plant, and you in March before the frost you have to not cut, écraser.
Break.
Yes, break it.
So you push it down.
You
don't
push,
cut.
yeah, exactly, and you do.
So you get your mulch and your nitrogen.
Mulching. You have a big mulching, because 2 principal problem in the culture in the world, it's monoculture, just one culture. It's a big problem. And the second, it's with nothing on your soil. The sun burn everything on the soil, and the principle, the organic structure, the whole piece of wood of the vine, les feuilles, skin, and all you give in your soil, the matière organique, okay, burn with the soil, and the animal can't eat it, and can't make shit, and no food for the soil and the vineyard. And you have to have herbs on your soil to protect it. But it's a long work, but for the next September we will plant all Hautes-Côtes de Nuits with vegetable couverture and a piece of vineyard of La Côte, and I want to plant 3 hectares to start in the Hautes-Côtes de Nuits, and I want to plant 3 in the Clos Sorbè because the parcel is 1.2 hectares, it's a big parcel for me, and in Les Pruliers, and after every year we will plant 3. And we did 2 big days with the doctor of agroforestry from France, Alain Canet, and I invited 15 different French winemakers from La Côte. Can't understand this process, and with Dujac, Trappert, Rossignol, a lot of people, good winemakers for me, and it was very, very great. And we continue with the friend of Alain Canet, the specialist for the vegetable couverture, Konrad Schreiber, at the end of August with the same winemakers, and we have to change everything. We can't continue with this future with the new climate. But without the new climate, it's the same. We have no soil, we have no food in the soil, we have nothing. If you don't give every winter food in the rain, after 4 years, we have no grapes. And but I think it's easier to understand that. For me, biodynamic, it's not easier to understand the biodynamic because you can't analyze the result. It's in your head, the same like homeopathy. You have to think about you have to think about that a lot of to have a result. But for me, it's agroforestry and vegetable. It's bon sens en français.
Common sense.
Yeah, it's easier for every people come from everywhere to understand one day with Alain Canet and the Swiss. It's bon sens. And I want to go, and it's not new, huh? It's 100 years before, we had a lot of trees everywhere in the vineyard with a lot of birds, eat the small chenille, the larve.
Caterpillars, bugs, worms. I think it's caterpillar for the moths.
Yeah, caterpillar. Oh, yes, c'est ça. Yes, caterpillar. Eat our plant during the April at the beginning. Everything in this year. Yeah. And if you have birds in your trees in the night, the chauve-souris c'est Batman. Batman, it's Batman. Chauve-souris. Merde. Bat?
Yeah.
The bat, bird.
Bat?
Hmm?
The one that
eat,
can't see.
eat, yeah, in the night, eat the caterpillar. And a lot of in the summer, the trees give water in the soil. 100 liters per day per tree. And communication, if you have a area with water, you plant a way of trees to your parcel with 80 trees per hectare. The water follow the trees in your parcels, and you can plant every different variety of trees. And a lot of people started 20 years ago in Bordeaux in Cheval Blanc. Cheval Blanc started last year. They want to plant 10,000 trees in the 39 hectares. Nuits-Saint-Georges, Hautes-Côtes. 75 in the premier cru, 75% wall cluster, and 40% new oak maximum for the edge barrels. The limestone from between Nuits-Saint-Georges and Vosne-Romanée, the limestone is soft, and the wine it's a little more elegant, but you can smell the minerality. You can know the blind tasting. It's Nuits-Saint-Georges. At the south of Nuits-Saint-Georges, it's more hard. And usually you have more minerality on this soil, but you have another valley between Saint-Georges and Chabeuf, and you have another soil. But usually at the south of Nuits-Saint-Georges, it's typically Nuits-Saint-Georges, and with more masculine wine and minerality. Nuits-Saint-Georges, Les Pruliers, the beginning of Saint-Georges. Every time it's more round, rich, the same alcohol degrees, but I feel more, for me it's more rich, more sun, more hot. Since 30 years now with Les Pruliers, it's easier to drink when it's young if you compare with the Thorey of Les Procès. Les Procès is just before Les Pruliers, small appellation with 1.5 hectares and a small hill with a lot of limestone without a big soil, just 20 centimeters before the limestone. And Les Procès, it's very, very mineral. And Prulier, it's more rich.
Is there more iron in the soil as well in Prulier compared to the Thorey?
It's more red with more fer, le fer.
Iron.
Yeah. A lot.
You feel that in the wine.
Yeah. And a lot of very small piece of limestone. The soil is very good drainage, and do you want to test a Grand Cru or do you want to stop here? For the tasting, it's a little more expensive with the Grand Cru. You can choose. Echezeaux. Rouge du Bas. 90% Old Cluster, 40% New York. Yeah, it's on the hill. My vine is very old, 90 years old. It's a little more mineral in Rouge du Bas if you compare with the 7 hectares of Echezeaux, and I think the best of area it's Echezeaux du Dessus, Rouge du Bas, Poulaillère, and Combe d'Orvaux. It's the good, great area for the Echezeaux. It's very different with the other on the flat area with more clay and for me less complexity. Here the red is the soil is very red, and the same like Prulier with a lot of small piece of limestone. Clos de la Roche. For me, it's one of my favorite. I like the minority. I like the complexity. I like the longer. It's a very good appellation. I started my work 30 years ago. I was 19 years old, and Nuits-Saint-Georges and Morey-Saint-Denis, they were the last of the appellation from Côte de Nuits. After 30 years, Morey-Saint-Denis is here. Nuits-Saint-Georges stay at the same place. Why? The winemakers, a lot of very good winemakers with my generation made a lot of very good wines, and the reputation of the Morey-Saint-Denis more and more. For example, in USA. In USA, 15 years ago, we spoke about Clos de la Roche. Everybody knows Clos de la Roche in New York. In France, Clos de la Roche. What? Morey-Saint-Denis, Grand Cru. Ah ouais, Morey-Saint-Denis. Wow, no, it's not good. Because all winemakers sold the wine in export and nothing in France. And now it's easier for me to to have a lot of good winemakers from Morey-Saint-Denis than Nuits-Saint-Georges. In Morey-Saint-Denis, you have Cyprien Arlot, Magnin, Dujac, Claude Lambray, Clos Saint-Denis, Ponceau, Perromino, Hubert Ligné, Ligné Michelot. Very easy in Nuits-Saint-Georges. Live in Nuits-Saint-Georges. Liger-Belair, Leschneau, Gouges with the new style, and after it's difficult. And I think reputation of appellations is very important to have very good winemakers. Latricières-Chambertin. Be careful, it's very good. Be careful. We are at go to Chambertin after my vine. You have Rémy and Bise from Savigny-les-Beaunes, and after it's Chambertin. I touched Leroy because my parcel from Rémy in 2009, and Leroy bought the other piece of Rémy 10, 12 years before. I touch le roi in Chambertin, I touch le roi in Latricières-Chambertin for the same reasons. Sometimes I cut the grapes in le roi. It's not a problem. Chambertin. Latricière, it's more aerial, subtle, elegant, fine. Chambertin, it's more large. And the climate from Latricière, it's La Combe Grisard with a little cold wind every time from the forest on the Latricière and the Mazoyère. And Chambertin, it's a little more, not masculine, but more structure, more, for me, it's more large. But Latricière, it's, for me, very interesting. You read, you test, you see, you understand everything. Yes. You ride the tractor for the first plowings in March. You look at the soil. You know where you are. In Grand Cru, in Premier Cru, in village, at the top of the parcels of the village, or at the low. Yeah. You see everything with the soul. And you understand everything. Voilà. Excuse me, my English. It's so difficult. It will be better with my son for the next years.